In this episode, we complete our 1,300 nautical mile trip from Indonesia to Malaysia. When we last left you, we found a quiet little anchorage right on the edge of the Malacca Strait, surrounded by local fishermen and with views across to Singapore just a few miles away. Today's journey required an early start. It'll take us across the two separation zones of the shipping lane and up the southwest coast of Malaysia towards Pangkor. That's a passage of 300 nautical miles or 550 kilometres, but the question is, will we do this trip in one go? We'd been enjoying the southeast trades, but there was every chance they'd disappear as we crossed the equator. After having sailed the Malacca Strait a few times already, we knew this could be a gruelling trip. Our success will depend as much on our own stoicism as it will the winds. Fortunately, it didn't take long to catch those trades.
This is the first time in 1,095 miles that the wind has been forward of the beam. And it's only going to be for a couple of miles because we are effectively heading southwest to get to the outside of that bottom of that shipping lane and then head up northwest. We are trying to avoid the traffic and the congestion that you get around Singapore itself off the shipping lane. It can be quite fraught. We've crossed once and been round it 3 times, I think. It's interesting. It's an interesting journey, especially seeing Singapore, and fascinating to see all of the container ships offloading all their stuff. But it's still I could do without the headache, let's face it. But I need to give another nod of credit to Ollie for that anchorage, because it was a rather delightful anchorage. It's not marked anywhere. I'm going to mark it and credit Ollie for the suggestion, because it's a V shape and you tuck yourself in, and because we've got southeasterly trades, of course, it's completely in the lee of all of that. So we had another very good night's sleep. So yeah, just motor sailing just to get us around this point, and then I'm hoping that we can get the sails out. We're going to have a bit of current against us, but yeah, it's all good so far.
It was very definitely a good idea to skirt around the outside of the shipping lane at this point. Traffic tends to bottleneck here, but it's also coming from different directions, with many ferries running between the Indonesian islands as well as fishing boats bobbing slowly with their nets out. So with the wind back behind us, we headed northwest up the side of the last Indonesian island of Karimun Besar. The further north we went, the larger the gaps between the big ships. Immediate hazards were now just fishing boats and tugs, so once we were clear of them, we just needed a gap to make the passage across the separation zones.
What you've just missed is the mad dash across the first half of the shipping lane. We saw a gap in the market, so we took advantage of it, and that put the wind on the beam, which meant we could shoot across by sail, which was great. So we were doing 7 odd knots, hitting 7 knots through that gap. We're now in the centre where it's pink, where we're not supposed to be hanging around.
The first bit was fine. We had to wait for a few boats. Then we hung around in the middle, and then we waited for a good gap, turned the boat almost at right angles to the oncoming traffic, and you take the quickest line you can across, which is what we're doing now.
And we're now waiting. If I swing round, I don't know if you can see him, there's a ship there, Sea Passion he's called, and he's doing 11 knots. He's coming around the corner. This is where there's a little dog leg, so we're just waiting for him to pass, and we don't think there's anything behind him, in which case we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to turn to starboard, put the wind on the beam and shoot across the second section. We've
got a good speed. We are between 6.5 knots going straight across. There are quite a few boats in front of us, which is a little nerve-wracking until you check on AIS and you check your bearings and you see they're not moving, so it looks like they're anchored.
Just had a nice friendly chat with the skipper of Sea Passion. That's the ship you can see behind me. And he's confirmed he's going to pass us down our starboard side. He's actually on this dog leg on the corner, so he's coming around the corner. Hopefully once he's passed, we're going to turn to starboard, catch that wind and do the second half of the main shipping lane. The one we've then got to contend with is the inner shipping lane, but I think we'll just stick in the sort of division between the two until that's all clear. So yeah, are you ready, Elizabeth?
We've had this one boat on my right hand side which is coming up this traffic zone, and he's the only one we've really had to worry about. But according to all the information we've got, we should be across before he gets to us. We're halfway now. Jamie's just checking. Fun, isn't it? With the crossing of the main shipping lane now complete, we could continue northwest up the coast of Malaysia. This takes us past a congested anchorage, but the only traffic moving are large commercial vessels off our port beam travelling in the same direction. The lane is narrow and remains busy, but we were pleased that we'd managed to navigate the worst of it in daylight. The Malacca Strait sees over 200 ships pass through every day. Many are more than 350 metres long, travelling at over 14 knots. For us sailing at 6 or 7 knots, this was easy to manage, plus we had intended to anchor for the night to take a rest because we knew the real navigation hazards were yet to come. And there was the weather to contend with.
Well, as you may be able to see behind me, the remainder of the sun, actually the camera's putting in more light than what I can see. It's now fully dark. You may be able to see the odd ship around us with their lights on. In fact, the whole horizon is full of lights. Why is this? Weren't we supposed to be anchoring today? Well, we checked the winds and it seems as if we've only got another 2 days of wind and then it dies. And from experience, the Malacca Strait, when there's no wind, is not a pleasant place to be, especially if you start getting little pockets of squalls and so on. So I managed to twist Liz's arm and persuade her that we should just make the most of these and carry on. And so that is what we're doing. We've had some good winds. We were poled out earlier. We were doing a good 7 knots. We had some current with us. Currents changed, but I'm happy to say that even without the pole, we're still making good progress. Also decided to stay inside the shipping lane. It is possible to run alongside the shipping lane. However, we have to contend with Malaysian fishing boats, and Malaysian fishing boats are a law unto themselves and they operate outside the shipping lane, obviously. So I think it's probably prudent to stay within the shipping lane and right on the edge and play with the big boys. Not sure how well this is coming out. We're in night mode here. This ship is extremely close to us. We have been hailing them on channel 16 and actually been talking to them, asking them to alter their course to port. As you can see, they are very close. Yeah, difficult to explain how close this is, but I think one of the problems is that we find most commercial skippers are accommodating, responsive, and they know the lay of the land and the law of the sea and all that, but every now and then you do get the odd skipper who appears to act clueless, and they were coming right up our backside, I mean literally right up behind us, and they hadn't spotted us, and so we had to get on VHF and explain to them we're a sailing boat, we're 2 miles in front, please alter your course to port, because of course we're on the edge of the shipping lane here. Overtaking vessel and all that, but you know, even if we were to try and move out the way, we're moving so slowly compared to him.
0.12 miles away.
Say that again, Liz?
Is it 0.12 miles away they are as they're passing?
Yeah, I mean that's 0.12 miles, Liz is saying. And the thing is, it's not like he's constrained by other vessels on his port side. He had plenty of room to move over. He was kind of reticent to shift over 3 degrees just to clear us, and I think the problem is that a lot of these skippers, they have no idea what it's like to be on a small vessel in terms of, you know, our speed and our manoeuvrability. But there we go, we did the right thing, we got in touch, they responded and they did move, so that is something.
Although they didn't know what AIS was.
Oh, yes. But do you know what my theory is? I think, so it was a girl I spoke to, I reckon she's an interpreter.
Right.
For the skipper.
Right.
Because there were delays after, every time I asked a question,
Yes.
there was a delay.
Yes.
That's my theory. Anyway, plodding along here. That's enough excitement for the next few hours, I think. Thank you very much. Poor old Liz is exhausted. How are you feeling?
Well, the trouble is that kind of thing, it does wear you out, you know, it gets the adrenaline going. I watched it when I saw it arrive. I saw 3 on the horizon, and this one had both red and green lights showing, and I thought, well, he's perhaps going to move. But I watched it and realised it wasn't going to move, and I couldn't see any changes, so at that stage I told you about it, and then it all happened. But they definitely hadn't seen us, and it was odd when you first contacted them. Our intentions are to continue on the journey that we're on, so we just don't want to be mown down, thank you very much. Can you go round us, please?
Well, the moon is out, which is always nice, but we've just had another encounter. It's this ship here. I think I spoke to 4 people in the end. And this is another ship that was directly behind us, and he was on a collision. Now, before you ask, why don't we just alter course to starboard? Well, the problem with that is that we're right on the edge of the shipping lane. There's a little pink separation zone, and then on the other side is local traffic, and most of that local traffic is running that way. It's running down against us. So we've got fishing boats, which you can just see the lights of behind the boom there. We've had 2 big tankers go past and more fishing boats up ahead. So anyway, the point is that going to starboard isn't really an option. However, he's got lots and lots of room to go to port. I suspect what happens is that the low-ranking crew are monitoring while the skipper is asleep. And you can tell just by their etiquette on the VHF, they're not very good. Lots of radio silences. I probably held them about 20 times in total, going backwards and forwards, swapping channels. And, you know, the first lot said, oh no, we can't see you, we can't see you. And I kept saying, I'm telling you, you're on a collision with us. Eventually, they woke up the skipper because a different voice came on and he was much more, you know, together, let's say. And he said, okay, I'll check my systems. And he came back, he said, oh yes, you're Esper, I can see you're doing 5.2 knots or whatever it is, and knew exactly who we were. So just goes to show you that sometimes you really do have to be persistent, and it's a little bit embarrassing sometimes, but there we go. So we've got our lower navigation lights on, which is why that's all lit up. It should be pointing backwards, but the light leaks a little. But this, we think, is probably a lot brighter than our tricolor at the top of the mast. I'll probably turn that off once this boat passes.
Did you see the all-round flashing red light on that passing ship? After checking the coal regs, we understand it could have been a Bravo light, signifying that it's carrying dangerous cargo. As we made our way, we caught up with this ship and others, now at anchor and all with the same light configuration. This seems to be where ships dump their ballast. Ships are not allowed to discharge ballast water in areas where water is drawn for a water supply, or in areas where national or local authorities prohibit waste discharge. This is in order to avoid introducing invasive species into the marine environment. Some vessels carry so much ballast and cargo that the crew seen walking along the deck appear to be walking on the water. This is a clearly marked dumping ground for the many vessels headed to Port Klang, our next possible anchorage.
It's the middle of the second day and we're making really good progress. Generally very happy, even with those tides set against us. When we have our head sail out, we're still managing to punch through at 5 knots. But with the tide, we're doing a good constant 7 knots, which is great. I just wanted to show you this ship though, coming up behind me. These are the kind of ships we're having to contend with. And this one's a particularly big one. I'll just swing the camera around. It's probably difficult to get any kind of perspective with this camera. That is called Sea Leopard. He's off to the Arabian Sea, and he is 333 meters in length. 333 meters. we're 13 metres. And believe it or not, that's not even the biggest we've seen. We actually saw the world's biggest or longest container, which is over half a kilometre long. Can you believe that? Over 500 metres in length. Anyway, big bastard. He's going to Arabian Sea, he's going up to Penang, and the third one's going to India.
Port Klang was going to be our next stop, but with only another 24 hours of wind predicted, we sailed past into the night. Klang is surrounded by shallow water and a phenomenon known as sand waves, which can change the charted depths. It's also where the official shipping lane ends, so we had an interesting time navigating around a brand new lighthouse that wasn't charted, with the old lighthouse left unlit close to our course. Still, we had some excellent wind, and with the changing course to a northerly, we had a superb night passage, with all the sails out and the sea lit by a full moon.
We're coming into our third morning now. We've done exactly 48 hours, and I have to say it's been one of the best sails that we have done in a very long time. Who would have thought it, the Malacca Strait would present such great sailing opportunities? I don't think we've ever sailed up this way with southerlies before. It's normally been in between seasons or with the horrible sort of the southwest, I suppose. But it's been great. Haven't turned the engine on once. We've done over 200 miles now. We've stuck fairly close to land. Basically, we followed the shipping lane. We stayed inside the shipping lane, right on the edge. A couple of minor incidences with boats coming quite close to us, but aside from that, just staying in the shipping lane just removed that headache of going through the fishing boats, and especially around Port Klang, which is very busy with all the commercial shipping as well. So I recommend it. If you come up this way, it's the way to do it. And now here in our third day, as we approach Lumut or Pancor, there's still about 50 miles to go, but with these southeasterlies, the fetch is quite low. As you can see, the sea is pretty flat, and yet we're pushing along at 5.5 knots, and that's with a good knot of current with us. So we've seen that current obviously go up and down with the tides, and I think the most I saw was 2.6 knots. So for 6 hours that's with us, and for 6 hours that's against us, or thereabouts anyway. Yeah, but it's been great. It's been really, really good. Really enjoyed it. Obviously a bit tired, and I did the dirty on Liz last night. I did 2 hours of a watch with no boats around at all, set the sails, and as she came on watch at 2 o'clock in the morning, I left her with a whole load of fishing boats on the horizon with their flashing lights showing their nets, but she successfully navigated her way through, and she's now fast asleep, so I think I'll let her sleep in. Well folks, this is it. This is our last leg before we get to Pancor Marina, and it could be our last sail for a little while because I have to return to the UK. Well, I don't have to, but I'm going to go back and see my family. So yeah, we're just making the most of this. And I just wanted to end this little piece by saying, why can't all sailing be like this? Just take a look around. We have pretty much flat, calm seas. We've got a good 12, maybe 15 knots, broad reaching. It's just, you know, this is exactly what sailing should be like. Not that bucking and rolling and violently being thrown around kind of sailing. This is the kind of sailing that we both really enjoy. And so that's why it's such a nice thing to be able to end this very long trip I'll put the number below as to how many miles it is in total, which I would say 99% of it has been sailed, but I would say the last 24 hours, including up until now, have been the best bit of the sailing of the whole trip.